Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the July 23rd, 2013 meeting of the Glendale City Council, being called to order at 6:02 p.m. May we have a roll call?
Council members Friedman. Here. Najarian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Sinanian.
Here.
And Mayor Weaver.
Here. The flag salute tonight will be led by Councilmember Sinanian, and the invocation by Assistant City Clerk Rita Buchanan. Please stand.
Please join me in saluting the flag of the United States of America.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Remain standing, please, and bow our heads. We are grateful this evening for all you have provided for this fine city and its citizens. It is our prayer that we may be worthy of these blessings. Guide the council as they consider the matters before them, and grant them the wisdom and insight that all their decisions be according to your will. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. May we have your report?
The agenda for the July 23, 2013 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Friday, July 19, 2013 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
And next, please.
Item 3 are presentations. At 3A is the agenda preview for the meetings of July 30, 2013.
Ms. Beers.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, for July 30th, we have no Glendale Housing Authority agenda items. That afternoon to commence at 3 p.m., however, we do have a Glendale City Council and successor agency meeting, joint meeting. This is Director of Economic Development, proposed formation of a local economic development agency in Glendale. We do have another special meeting in the afternoon of the Glendale City Council. This is a public hearing, Director of Community Development, regarding proposed amendments to certain sections of the GMC related to signage at the Glendale Galleria and the Americana at Brand. That evening for Council to commence at 6 p.m., we have a number of consent items, Director of Community Development, use of contractual plan check and inspection services by the Building and Safety Division of the Community Development Department, Director of Community Services and Parks, Verdugo Workforce Investment Board's 5-year strategic plan for 2013 through 2017, Acting General Manager of Glendale Water and Power, amendment of a professional services agreement with Utility Integration Solutions, contract to provide outage management system integration and operations technology advisory services, Acting General Manager of Glendale Water and Power, statewide and local electric and water customer surveys. Under action items, Fire Chief, weed abatement charges for 2012-2013. Director of Community Services and Parks, this is the Maple Park Improvement Project, and this is in connection with spec number 3514. And we have 3 items under hearings, and they are all Glendale Register Nomination and Mills Act, and these are for properties located at 1050 Hillcroft Road, 1471 Royal Boulevard, and 1753 Hillcrest Avenue. And that concludes my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. What's next, please?
Item 3B, introduction of new Glendale Chamber of Commerce members.
Okay, I don't know anything about this, so who put it on? Or Judy, is it your thing? Okay.
Mayor Weaver, members of the council, I'm Judy Kendall, and I'm here tonight with our chairman of the board, Scott Drolet, to, for the first time, introduce some of our new members to the Glendale Chamber of Commerce. We thought this would be something that would be a good, positive thing to do, and these are people who, some of which are new businesses in Glendale, some have been in Glendale, but they've just joined the chamber. Others are located outside of the city, but they're doing business here, and they've all made an investment in our city. So we want to recognize them for what they contribute to the city of Glendale. So we would just like to go through a quick PowerPoint and introduce, it's about 3 months worth of members, and Scott is going to start with that.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having us here this evening. Starting off, Rolling Robots is George Kirkman. Rolling Robots is an environment for parties and a high-tech workshop for young roboteers, which provides an exciting learning environment where kids who love to build, create, and compete can just have fun. Stepping Stone Players, Kurt, who is with us today, Swatiskas, Stepping Stone Players are Glendale's Diamond Award-winning community theater presenting Oliver August 2nd through the 18th with tickets and discounts available online at glendalearts.org. Payment Solution, Abdullah A. Mamam. Payment Solution USA provides web business consulting, payment processing, payroll services, website development, and more.
Okay, and we have Elevate Glendale. The distinctive urban lofts at Elevate are brand new. I think most of you have seen them. They're super connected and green with a 26,000 square foot sky deck with awe-inspiring views and fun 24/7, all within walking distance to great shopping, dining, and bars. And Yolian Insurance Agency, Leon Yolian. Yolian Insurance Agency is an independent health, life, and commercial insurance agency specializing in custom insurance plans tailored to each client's specific needs, both individuals and businesses. And Harp Enchantment, Sonia Marie Olivas. Sonia Marie provides beautiful harp music for weddings, therapy and wellness, concerts, banquets, afternoon tea, music lessons, art exhibits, church services, funerals, recording sessions, anniversaries, and more.
iCard 360 with Sassoon Mansourian. Small business credit card processing services that can be tailored to fit your exact needs. Medallion Telecom, Gary Kachuam. Medallion Telecom is a complete communication solutions provider offering the most cost-effective solutions to businesses of all sizes. And CMGT Construction Company, Gregory's also here, Gregory Tan, developer of the proposed Colorado Street mixed-use project.
And Bay Alarm Company, been established since 1946, protecting businesses and residents all across California, providing services including burglar systems, fire systems, access control, video surveillance, and 24-hour monitoring. And the Glendale Tap, Steve Skarupa, a comfortable, friendly neighborhood beer bar that just happens to have 52 taps, including ciders and a couple of organic beers, along with a nice selection of bottled beer, a few old-fashioned soda pops, and they have 2 free pool tables, just as any good beer shop bar should.
Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, Christopher Mendoza. The Cystic Fibrosis Foundation is the world's leader in the search for a cure for cystic fibrosis. CFF funds more CF research than any other organization, and nearly every CF drug available today was made possible because of foundation support. The Tulakan Times, John Konyojoyan. Tulakan Times is a free weekly community newspaper published since 1937 with over 600 drop locations throughout the San Fernando, San Gabriel valleys and available online. Anthony Portantino. Anthony Portantino is a former California State Assembly member of the 44th District.
And the 2020 Network, Timothy Gallagher. The 2020 Network works with you as part of your team to develop your identity, deliver the message, and manage your reputation. National Cremation Society, Ramona Raymer. They provide services making arranging cremation simple with caring staff available to guide you through the planning process, whether for an immediate need or a future need. And the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, James Clark. They were established in 1917. The Apartment Association of Greater LA serves the needs of rental housing providers with legal aid, forms, listings of vacancies, programs for tenants, and advocacy. So that's our listing of new members, and we welcome them to the Chamber. We hope you will as well. And if you would like referrals to other fine Chamber members, you can go to our website or call the Chamber. We're at www.glendale-chamber.com. We have just today posted a digital directory of our members, and we have our regular directory that is updated every single day. So thank you for your time, and I'd like to ask the members that are here to stand up and be recognized. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
And before the next item, Mr. Ochoa, in case there's anybody here for items 8E and F, City Manager would like to pull those items off. Yes, sir. So no need to stick around for E and F if you're planning to. Okay, none of you are here for that. Okay. What is next, please?
At item C, Mayor's commendations to the sponsors of the 2013 I Love My Neighborhood poster contest.
Thank you. Come forth. Oh, I have 1, 2, 3 commendations. They're all similar, so I'll read one, and then Lenore, you can speak. In appreciation of your gold-level sponsorship of the 20th annual I Love My Neighborhood poster contest, I commend your dedication and commitment in keeping tradition alive and thriving. 1 to Glendale Water and Power, 1 to Glendale Public Works, and 1 to DPS banners. Our representatives here are Lenore,
Yes.
are you taking them all?
Yes, we have John Taktalian from Glendale Water and Power.
Never heard of them.
Vic Golanian from Public Works, and Ara Abrahamian from DPS Banners. Please
Okay,
come
come
forward if you're
forth.
present.
Come forth.
And as you know, our I Love My Neighborhood poster contest is designed to instill neighborhood pride in our pre-kindergarten through 8th grade students. And we received over 4,500 entries, and the winners were selected based on their representation of the Keep Glendale Clean in 2013.
And for the first time in all the years I've attended, I picked the winner before the winner was nominated or told. So she is a great artist. Great artist. So, 6th grade, I think. Go right ahead, Mr.
Does that
Gutierrez.
talent extend to other events? Picking the horses at
No. I'm not a gambler.
Congratulations, John Taktalian, Rubik Galanian, Public Works, and Ara. Congratulations. Thank you for your thing.
Yes, we thank you. You know, without our sponsors, we could never make this possible. Thank you very much. Great American Cleanup.
Oh, you're doing that one too?
Yes.
Okay, I'll read the proclamation. In appreciation of your gold-level sponsorship of Glendale's 25th Annual Great American Cleanup, I commend your dedication and commitment in keeping tradition alive and thriving, presenting it to Glendale Water and Power, Glendale Public Works, the Walt Disney Company, Glendale Association of Realtors, Glendale Management Association, Jewel City Kiwanis, and the Office of the Police Chief.
As you know, our
Speakers here?
Yes, they are. I'll bring them up. Just want to let you know that our Great American Cleanup is a tradition here in Glendale. We're keeping our streets clean, painting out graffiti, making our Jewel City as sparkly as possible. And the representatives for the Great American Cleanup sponsors, Walt Disney, Joan McCarthy, Glendale Water and Power, John Taktalian, Public Works, Rubik Golanian, Association of Realtors, Rick Barnes, the Glendale Management Association, Laura Stotler, Kevin Carter, Rubik Golanian, Jewel City Kiwanis, Alice Habrabayan, and Office of the Chief, Sergeant John Gilkerson.
Okay, they're similar.
Public Works, Walt Disney Company, Association of Realtors. Congratulations and thank you. More.
And we have Glendale Management. Office of the Police. Congratulations.
Congratulations all.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. 2 great annual events. Okay, what is next, please?
Item 4, our city council and/or staff comments.
Any comments? I have one. It's related to last week, Mr. Garcia, when I asked about getting information for a former candidate. And you apparently wrote an email to him, which I had. There was one sentence, though, that was missing. Mr. Kasakian had written, "I will sit down with you and provide you an opportunity to examine the envelopes." And he knows that he might It might not do anything, but it was his wish, and it was Artie Kasakian who agreed to it. So your email to Shai Karolian seemed to indicate with your email it was over with, but he simply asked, I collaborated that with him again, you just want to sit down, as Mr. Kasakian said he would, and look at them. Nothing more. So I'd like to hope that that would be done within the next week. Approaching 4 months now, and he hasn't had that courtesy yet. So I hope it'll happen next week. Mr. Quintero.
Well, I want to thank the committee, the Cruise Night Committee. It was an overwhelming success, as it is every year. And police obviously participates, fire, public works, parks, and community services. But it was a super well-attended event. All of the Brand Boulevard of cars, or most of the car dealerships, had their cars on display, as well as the local Harley-Davidson dealership. That particular group was, busy all night selling T-shirts and people looking at the motorcycles. But anyway, it was just a great event. That committee just keeps on clicking. Dan Bell's the newest member, and we're expecting even better things for next year.
Sinai.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Indeed, a wonderful event, well attended. I want to thank everyone that Councilmember Quintero thanked. Also, all of our community members who had booths there. That was wonderful. A lot of opportunities to get to know the organizations that are present in our city, the good work that they do, and promote the work that they do. Also, I wanted to bring to our residents' attention an issue that's come up recently in terms of the apparent proliferation of these massage parlors in the city of Glendale, which is strange for two reasons: the number of parlors that have arisen, and also the physical appearance of these parlors. The front windows are always covered. And when I say a proliferation, if one were to drive from the intersection of Brand and Colorado east, within about 6 or 7 blocks, you can see about 10 of them at least. I can't imagine why there will be that many parlors in the city of Glendale in such a small geographic area. So, and on top of that, as I said, there's no transparency. You can't see what's there. So I'm hoping that, and I know that staff is aware of this problem. Our residents have brought this to our attention on numerous occasions now within the last week, and hope we can take some rigorous action as to determining how legitimate these operations are.
Sure they will.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
No, don't need any further comment on that. They're very aware. At least we're bringing it up. Okay, I have one more. Sergeant Gilkerson wants to say something. Something important, I hope.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council and city staff. I'm Sergeant John Gilkerson from the Community Policing Office. And I just wanted to remind everyone that Tuesday, August 6th, 2 weeks away, National Night Out, 6 to 8 p.m. And I think best to explain it would probably be our public service announcement on Channel 6, if we can cue that up. And if not, we can. There we are.
The Glendale Police Department invites you and your neighbors to take part in National Night Out on Tuesday, August 6th. This event is an opportunity to meet your neighbors, interact with city officials, and form lasting relationships to reduce crime and increase quality of life at the neighborhood level. Be one of 36 million community members from all 50 states who want to let criminals know that their neighborhoods and cities are taking a stand against crime. For more information or to host an event in your neighborhood, visit GlendaleNNO.com or call the Glendale Police Department Area Command Office at 818-548-4015. See you for National Night Out on Tuesday, August the 6th.
That's one of my officers. She did that in one take. Anyway, we have 52 events on the list for this year, just a little bit more than we had last year. We'll probably add a few more. People can find out where the events are in their neighborhood by visiting the website, glendaleno.com. They can register an event. We still have time to put them on. 818-548-4015. They can call the office. We'll be happy to have them.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Thank you.
Okay, I have no further comments. What is next, please?
At items 5A through D are consent items. They are routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of the council or the audience requesting separate consideration may do so by making such request before motion is proposed.
I have no
I'll
parts.
move the consent calendar.
Second.
Roll call.
Second. Councilmembers Friedman,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Sinanian,
Yes.
Mayor Weaver.
Aye. Next.
Item 6 are oral communications, the 3-minute event announcement portion.
Okay, one caller. Oliver Soku. Shoku. What'd I say? Soku? Shoku.
Shoku.
Nice to see you.
Shoku. Yeah, thank you.
Shoku.
Honored to be here. I'm here to representing Harley Davidson Glendale and Love Ride Foundation, the 30th anniversary of the Love Ride this year. As you may know, Love Ride's raised approximately $24 million in its 29-year history, of which $14 million was actually checks written out to various charities, including Muscular Dystrophy Association. Last year it was USO, and we've had other beneficiaries as well. So we'd like to invite everyone to come out and join us on the 30th annual Love Ride, scheduled for October 20th. And we're having our official kickoff going on this Saturday at the dealership at Harley Davidson Glendale, and where we're going to make some announcements about the talent, the lineup. Of course, Jay Leno is going to be our Grand Marshal again, and hope you guys can all come out and join us. I know Frank's probably going to come out and ride with us. So anyway,
it's hard to believe, Oliver. It's that time of year again.
Yes.
Time just goes by.
Sure does.
Yeah, we'll make sure he's there.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
You just have to be very careful when you get on the stage with Jay Leno, as some of the other council members know. It's open season when he's on, when he's on the mic.
We definitely pick on that one.
There you go. Okay, thank you.
And thanks for your continued support.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
We'll see you then. Okay, what is next, please?
Item 7, adoption of ordinances. At 7A is ordinance amending titles 2, 4, 5, 8, 10, 12, 15, 16, and 30 of the GMC 1995 related to miscellaneous revisions and minor cleanups. It was introduced on July 16, 2013 by Councilmember Quintero.
Mr. Cho, you're going to Mr. Agani?
Yes, sir, I will. As you know, the council looked at and introduced the bulk of this ordinance last week with some concern and wanting of consideration for parking and variance or variations from parking standards by way of the review from the planning staff and how such variations from the parking standard up to a maximum of 10% from the current 5% threshold, how that would be administered and what that might look like in real terms, and ultimately what the council's purview over those types of determinations might be. So with that, Mr. Agani will give you an overview specifically of the parking issues.
Thank you, Mr. Ochoa. As requested by council,
Mr. Najarian.
Councilman Najarian, and I think other, we have grouped together the items that relate specifically to parking for this particular presentation. First, there are two sections under the subdivision code, that's titled 16, that a few years back the City Council changed the parking standards in the DSP, but we did not change the corresponding parking standards for condominiums. This section simply makes sure that in the DSP condominiums have the same parking standards as apartments, and in the DSP zone only. And there are two sections about it. One is assignment of parking spaces for condominiums, just the actual required parking, and then the other section is for when a building is converted from apartment to condominiums. The same parking standard applies. That's just for consistency's
I just want to
sake.
make sure. Any problem?
Well,
Sure.
can you just elaborate on that? That
Yes.
2 spaces.
2 spaces, it used to be
Reduced
that we
to one
required
space?
2 spaces per every unit, regardless of the number of bedrooms. A number of years ago, we did a parking analysis, we did a parking demand analysis. We came back to council for the urban nature of the downtown specific plan. We came up with studies that showed that the parking demand is actually less, and you directed staff to change the parking requirement in the code, and we did according to your direction, do as such, and then but we did not make those changes in the subdivision code. And then since then, we have come, and the discrepancy has continued. And now, this was a time for us to clean up the subdivision code so that in downtown, to the extent that any condominium is being built, or if any of these projects that are now being built as apartments, and we know some of them are being built with condominium standards, if they ever want to convert to condominiums, they'll be able to do so.
So potentially a 3-bedroom apartment being converted or a 3-bedroom condo would be required to only have 1 parking space if we adopt this.
That would be 2 spaces. It's 1 space for 1 and 2 bedrooms and 2 spaces for 3 bedrooms. That was the requirement that we did, which was different than before. It used to be
the extent that the downtown specific plan already has the requirements as they're listed here. All we're doing is correcting an omission that was not made at the time of the DSP approval.
So for 2-bedroom, it's 2 or 1.5? What?
For bedroom is 1. For 1 and 2 bedrooms is 1 space, and 3 bedrooms is 2 space.
Okay, and I just want to say that although we did change the downtown specific plan, the concept of reducing the parking requirements per the recommendation is basically theoretical. In theory, that is going to be enough parking. And my argument to my colleagues and to the general public is that with the huge number of units that are currently going up downtown, although the vast majority are apartments, we have yet to see whether our current parking standards are sufficient to meet all those units, those 2,000 units, when they come online. My argument is, let's hold off on this. We can't roll back the clock on what we've already approved for apartment buildings. My argument is, let's see what sort of impact this parking requirement will have on our downtown and other areas, well, just the DSP, on our downtown areas. We can go slow, and I urge my colleagues to let's see what these impacts are going to be before we go ahead and loosen up the parking for the condominiums and the conversions.
If I may respond to that with one exception. In fact, it was not theoretical. When we did the downtown specific plan, we did the mobility study, and we did extensive survey of existing downtowns similar to ours, and these are mid-size, mid-level kind of growth downtowns. We're not talking about Manhattans and high-rise places. And based on the studies that we accumulated, we brought evidence that, in fact, some of those places started out with high parking requirements. In fact, the parking demand went down because of the closeness and the density of the projects and the increased use of other forms of transportation as opposed to car transportation for every need that the residents tend to have. Based on the results that we had seen in other places, Council was convinced to change the parking study. It was not theoretical. That said, it's up to the Council to decide if you want to go that far with condominiums or not.
Well, let me finish my thought here. The theory may have been developed from observing other cities, but the impact that it will have and the sufficiency on the Glendale situation is theoretical. And I urge my colleagues, let's go slow. We've got a huge number of units on. There's no harm to see how those units are, how the residents adapt to the current parking, and if they do take other means of transportation, walking, biking, transit, God bless them, and God bless our planners and your wisdom. But if not, if they're bringing in 2 or 3 cars per unit, and those cars are overflowing onto our other neighborhoods, it's the people up here that feel the heat. And I urge, this is just a small portion that we can hold back on, and I urge restraint in light of the current boom of development that's going on. That's all.
Friedman.
As much as I appreciate Mr. Najarian's concerns, because I think they're real concerns, I don't think that this is the proper place to sort of address those concerns. I think if we want to look at parking in our code, we should look at it. But this is only dealing with condos, and to treat condominiums differently than apartments doesn't make sense to me, especially since no one's really building condos right now. But what we might see down the line is conversions of apartment buildings to condos. And if we don't change this, what's going to happen is that the owners of existing buildings with existing parking won't be able to convert from an apartment building to a condominium just because of this disparity in the code. And to me, that's a real problem. So I think we need to adopt this to keep that to prevent that from happening. And then if we want to go back and address Mr. Najarian's concerns, we should do that at some date where we address the parking for all of our buildings. But I think it's important that there's consistency, because condominiums, I don't think, unless someone can show me differently, don't have different parking requirements than apartments. So to me, this is not changing the amount of parking we're going to get. All it's going to do is stop people from converting their buildings at some point into condominiums. And that's not, I think, it's not the intended effect of this code. It's a side effect of what right now is an inconsistency. And if you want to stop condo conversions, you stop condo conversions. You don't frustrate people by having this weird disparity, in your rules. So I will support this change. I also don't have a problem with going back and discussing parking. I think that there are opportunities for parking, especially in terms of guest parking in the downtown with some of our businesses, our office buildings that don't use their parking lots at night at the time when most people who go and visit people in apartment buildings need the parking. There's opportunities to have shared parking. Other cities have done that to allow office buildings to lease out or to allow parking for nearby residences for guests in the off hours. I think we should explore all of that as part of just dealing with parking in the downtown. But this is not the place to do that, in my opinion.
Mr. Quintero.
Well, I don't anticipate any problems in the downtown. I think these buildings are going to be well parked in addition to some of the public structures that we have. My concern is in the neighborhoods. I think we have a lot of pressure in all of the multifamily neighborhoods. How is this going to affect the multifamily neighborhoods?
It's not changing the multifamily neighborhoods outside the DSP.
So it's strictly the DSP.
That's the next page.
Yeah, all right.
Well, while we're there, if you don't mind, Mr. Najarian made a suggestion a few weeks ago about looking at, I don't know what you call it, but where you have a neighborhood where it's sort of unrestricted parking, but changing it to where you have painted spaces that people have to park in. I really want to be sure we bring that back. I was in Adams Hill recently trying to park, and there were all of these sections where you could easily fit 2 cars, except people were parked in the middle of them, so only 1 car could fit. And this could, definitely solve that. So that was a great idea for Mr. Najarian. Let's bring that back sooner rather than later, at least to traffic and transportation or wherever it has to go.
Mr. Ghani?
Yes.
If we don't, I don't know which way to put it, if we don't do anything or if we do anything, what's it going to change downtown foreseeable future? Does this apply?
If this does not get adopted, every project that we have in place will continue. Every one of them is an apartment project. And I think that Councilwoman Friedman pointed out, the only thing that it might do is that if there is a proposal for conversion, that would become an issue. And we would have to come here ask for a parking reduction permit.
So right now, if your project's entitled, it doesn't apply.
Correct.
We have how many hundreds or thousands of units already entitled?
About over 1,000, close to 2,000. And then everything else that we're discussing with the applicants is going to be apartment buildings, which already can take advantage of the downtown specific plan parking requirement, except that since none of them is requesting to be a condominium.
So what will be the impact of a change?
Actually, this change will have no impact on the foreseeable
projects.
Mr. Sinani.
Why don't we just hold off on this? If it's not going to have an immediate impact on any development in the city, nor are we going to be able to properly quantify the impact that it will have if we change the negative impact that it'll have, why don't we just revisit this issue, or on an individual basis, as units want to, as certain developments want to change from apartments to convert to condos, and we'll deal with it.
I don't know that you would want to do it on a case-by-case basis for due process and legal reasons, but I would submit to you that in this presentation, in this report, there are policy changes that really require that level of scrutiny. This truly is just making one consistent with the other. If council decides that's just not worth the headache and heartache that you're going through right now in terms of making one mirror the other for condominium conversions, certainly we can bring it back in all likelihood next year when we do our code cleanups. We would bring this back to you in exactly the same way to say the DSP says this for apartments and it says this other thing for condo conversions. We want to make them the same because you'd be converting those existing apartment buildings into condos if that were ever to happen. So whether you do it now or a year from now, it's certainly your pleasure, but it doesn't really change anything.
But a year from now, we will have more of an idea of the impact of all these developments on the parking situation, no?
Perhaps not. The way that the apartments are being capitalized, the rates that are being used by investors and developers to build those apartments, condominium conversions probably won't take place for certainly the foreseeable future. So this is one of those things that, as you point out, you just want to bring it back later. Certainly you can, as I say, it's your pleasure. When we do bring it back, it would look exactly like this because all we're trying to do is mirror one standard to the other. It was an omission that was left out when the code was changed.
If I may add a couple more points to that. Right now, the differentiation between the two assumes, for some reason, condos have a higher parking demand than apartments. There's no evidence to show that. Now, if there is evidence to show that both may require higher parking requirements, that's a different discussion. But there's no evidence to say condos, for some reason, require more parking than apartments. That's number one. Number two, because of the differences in parking, there's little incentive for the developers to build ownership projects. And I know the city has, for the longest time, in the housing element, taken the position that we want to increase ownership. And this will work against that issue. Either whatever decision you make is fine, but what it does is that it creates a split that will prevent ownership projects from being built.
Well, I'm for making a consistency at this time. Now, you're going to go on to others. I think I'd like to break this and find out where the majority stands on these two before we move on. We're going to get a mess here. So on these two, what's the majority?
I mean, I'm for approving it only because I understand the logic. If it makes sense for apartments, it can't not make sense for condos. In fact, you want it to make sense for condos because we want condos more than we want apartments. That's the logic.
Good. So you're okay with it, Mr. Quintero?
Not okay with it.
I'm okay with it.
So am I. So that portion moves.
Thank you.
Sorry, old man. It's okay. Okay, now let's hit these two.
This section, the only thing that it does, it adds language that guest parking spaces must comply with ADA requirements. It does not change the number of guest parking requirements or anything. All it does is that it says they need to be ADA compliant. And the specifics of what is ADA compliant is in the building code. We make a reference to that, but we want the applicants to know from the get-go that guest parking is not exempt from ADA requirement. That's all.
Any comment on this one?
Isn't that required anyway? I mean, doesn't that?
It is required, but we are actually explicitly putting it in our code.
I'm okay with that.
Everybody okay with that?
That's right.
Okay, you got that too.
The one below basically increases the parking requirement for preschool uses to 3 from 2.7. The reason is that we already have 3 parking requirements for daycare parking, and for some reason preschool was different than that. We're making those consistent. They're very similar uses, and 3 per 1,000 is actually the required parking. In this case, we're making it a little bit more restrictive, not less.
Well, considering I have grandkids in preschool and kindergarten, I can understand.
Thank
Any problem with that? Yeah, you got that one too.
This one is regarding outdoor dining. So far, we actually did not have any written required parking for outdoor dining. Outdoor dining as a practice that came from old redevelopment practices was not required to have even one single parking. What we're doing here, we're in fact adding a section that makes outdoor dining, if not adjacent. By the way, the logic behind that was that outdoor dining is something we want especially in our downtown, and where we have restaurants, to activate the sidewalks and to create lively sidewalks. That was the argument behind that. We're still keeping that, but we're saying that if there is outdoor dining, especially now that outdoor dining is becoming more and more popular, people are coming up with proposals for large outdoor dining, which is not adjacent to the sidewalk, which basically is a restaurant without a top. We say those areas are actually subject to parking standards. We're imposing parking standards that didn't exist before. This one we did in practice for this. The reason that we put this in the code, about 3 years ago, there was a restaurant in town that wanted to create a huge outdoor dining area and wanted us to approve that with no parking. I wrote a code interpretation that the reason that our outdoor dining did not require parking was that it was meant to activate the sidewalk, and that was not that. Therefore, we would require the outdoor dining area to be parked. And based on that, we imposed parking standards on that particular applicant, and here we're codifying it.
Okay, now what will that mean? What percentage of outdoor?
It's not a percentage. Is that if your outdoor dining is adjacent to the sidewalk, typically that's not very large. That's a smaller area that people can do. Then there's no required parking. But if you're taking an extension in the back of your restaurant and adding, say, 2,000 square feet of outdoor dining, maybe you want to take advantage of the smoking ordinance provisions and create an outdoor smoking area separate from everything else, then you have to provide the parking required for that.
Parking based on?
Based on the code required for the use. If you're a restaurant, that would be for the restaurant.
It's not on square footage. It's
based on square footage.
That's right. That was trying to
right.
get at. How many square feet determines how many parking
We would
spaces
add
for-
the outdoor dining, which is not adjacent to the sidewalk, to the overall outdoor dining area of the restaurant.
Yeah.
Then the total gross area would be parked according to the code.
Square footage, which is already written into the code.
Correct.
Question?
Yes.
Do we require parking in our downtown restaurants?
We require parking for our downtown restaurants in the back if they're not adjacent to the sidewalks, yes.
So a restaurant like Carousel has to provide parking for their customers?
Well, we have a provision in the downtown that up to 5,000 square feet of uses can be changing uses. The way that it works is that we have old buildings that have the parking that they were grandfathered in. We have a problem when they want to change a use from a grandfathered use to a new use. In this case, if they want to, for example, change from retail to restaurant, and this is an old property and they do not have any way of providing the parking. A few years back, the council adopted some changes to the code that up to 5,000 square feet in downtown could change from those uses to one of the other uses without necessarily getting into that issue.
Right, because isn't that what our public lots are for?
Yes, that was the assumption, that the public lots are over there, and in fact, it has never created any problems.
And then what about restaurants that are on areas that have ample street parking? Do we look at those individually, or would they have to go into
We
a
look at those
variance?
individually based on their application. If they don't have sufficient parking, we give them the option of either applying for a parking use permit to lease out parking elsewhere and provide means of getting the cars there, or to apply for a parking reduction permit with a public hearing.
Valet service.
I do think that we need to be flexible with our businesses, to not be overly restrictive. We've got a lot of businesses that, I don't know if they provide parking or not, but I've been there many times and there's never any problem. And I just don't want to get into a situation where we hurt our businesses needlessly, when there's no problem because we're so afraid of a problem. So I like giving staff some flexibility. And there's a lot of restaurants I can think of that I frequent that I don't even think they have parking, but people can absolutely park because there's so much street parking in their area. So I just want to be sure, I don't know where it is, that
It's
both
actually
with
the
this
next
and
slide where we were talking about the 10%.
10%, right. So I hope that we can use the same discretion with the outdoor dining. I'm not exactly sure what adjacent to a sidewalk means because, I can think of a restaurant that has a new outdoor area that's maybe 10 feet from the sidewalk. It's not on the sidewalk, so is that adjacent to the sidewalk? Do we know what that means exactly?
That's what I'm talking about.
We're actually defining that in the code. We didn't before, and in one case it became an issue because there was a dead area at the back of a strip mall that somebody wanted to turn into outdoor dining, and we had to come up with an interpretation that although it's at the back, it's still visible from the street, and it enlivens that. And
so that would work. So, okay, the restaurant I'm thinking of has a row of parking in front of their outdoor area, but you can certainly see it from the sidewalk, so that would qualify.
Well, yes, except that if they remove parking to use it for outdoor dining, then they need to replace the parking they remove.
Okay.
Well, I guess if this doesn't work,
we get into that. And that's where we need the 10% modification to kind of work out solutions.
Right. And I know you're about to get into that, and that's not just for restaurant. And I'm not saying that only restaurants should get this benefit, so.
Right.
I guess if this doesn't work, you'll be back to us in the future for changes, right?
Yes. Yes. That's right.
Next. Okay, we're okay with that?
So that was section 3032.060. I believe I did not see any opposition to adding that. Yes.
We're okay.
So the lower area section in this is the part that we're just talking about. This is what we propose. Right now, staff has the ability to find exceptions through an administrative exception process up to 5 spaces, up to 3 spaces or 5% of the parking required for the use. And all we're doing is asking to increase the 5% to 10%. And here's the reason why. I explained last week that this comes into play when we have, a lot of times in this town, we have multi-tenant buildings or strip malls where they share parking area. And then this becomes an issue because somebody built the strip mall at some point and came and said, I'm going to designate this much of it for a restaurant and this much for retail. That's usually the typical thing. And all of a sudden, the restaurant wants to expand into one of the retail areas, and we run into this issue. And they parked it according to the code at that time for all that combination. So then we cannot allow them to expand the restaurant without getting into this rigmarole of parking issue. And then usually we ask them to apply for a parking reduction permit. We kind of really know from the get-go that they're not going to have parking issues because a lot of times those parking areas are available, and but we have to go through the exercise of going to a hearing and providing the evidence and showing that we're going to reduce the parking requirement for this restaurant based on these sort of circumstances. This would allow us to deal with those situations up to 10%. And I must add that I asked staff to look through our cases to bring in examples that I could bring to you today. And it was really difficult to find examples that were up to 10% because, and not more than that. A lot of the cases that we were looking at would still require to go through a hearing. There's only these few ones. There's one that we discovered that was really perfect. This one was one single building, 5,500 square feet at 1111 South Central. This building had one multi-tenant center at the time, and it had 69 on-site parking required. And no, it had 69, and they wanted to change the use. They wanted to change the use based on the required parking for the new use. They needed to increase their parking from 69 to 76. We knew from the get-go that this would not have any impact, but we had to put them through a parking reduction permit to get this. In this case, we would be able to use this if we make the proper findings. And we made the appropriate findings then, and we told the applicant, you can make the findings for a parking reduction permit. Therefore, we say you apply for a parking reduction permit. And they did, and we granted it. In this case, we would simply ask them to apply for a parking exception, administrative exception for parking reduction. And just the difference in time and application fee for a project like this would be like this. To apply for parking reduction permit, they would have to pay over $4,000 plus mailing, and they go through the several months of waiting and going through the staff reports and production. It would take about 30 hours of staff time to work on that. So the cost of staff time we can add to that, and that's reflected in the $4,000 permit fee. But if they could have applied for an administrative exception process, which costs $843, it's still a discretionary review process. Staff still has the ability to deny it or request that they make its modification before approving it. That's really the reason that we're asking for this. And now going to what's in front of you. Last week, Councilman Quintero introduced the ordinance as option 1, which was the ordinance as we presented it minus the 10% modification section. So the ordinance that's in your packet today does not include the 10% modification section, that one, on the lower part. So the council has 3 options. Option 1 is to adopt the ordinance as was introduced and not give staff the authority to do 10% modifications. Option 2 would be to follow what staff recommended last week and allow staff to keep this section in the code and be authorized to approve up to 10% parking modification. A copy of that ordinance is available with the city attorney. If you adopt that, we could go forward with that. Or option 3, anything that you'd like instead.
Well, I haven't heard an objection to any of the pages except the one.
Let me address the objection to the very last issue regarding the administrative exception. Number 1, looking back through the past, we have had some very difficult issues with administrative exceptions with other members of the planning staff who are no longer with us. Not exactly on the parking modification issue, but on other issues regarding uses, density, presumed uses, square footage, etc. Number 2, I'm just going to look at that decision, and I don't know the details, the example that you gave us, but this is a building in South Glendale, which is on Central, Chevy Chase, Palmer, one of the most impacted areas of the city regarding parking, an area where, if I'm not mistaken, we've gone through this whole South Glendale auto zone parking study, and this administrator issued an exemption for 7 parking spots in an area that's very highly impacted. Now, if this were to have come before me, I would have said, heck no, we've got a terrible parking situation down there. Why on earth are we giving an exemption for 7 spots? Whether it's going to be a billiard center or whether it's going to be a health spa. This is a type of decision that has impacts on those residents of South Glendale. And we have been through these issues. We hear these issues. The Transportation and Parking Commission, Planning Commission went through this whole exercise in how are we going to deal with parking in South Glendale. And here's an example where a 7-space exemption was made, and it could have been maybe up to 8, I guess, depending on how you figure the 10%, for parking in a very impacted area. And that's the type of decision that I don't want to be made administratively. I want it to come to council, and the council will have an overview of that. I'm not sure that the administrator in the planning department feels the same level of connection that we do as council members to the community. And we're the ones that catch the grief. And I think it's only fair that these types of decisions come to the council so we can have our own judgment and we can hear from the public, from whom we have heard many times before, on the exact issue of parking in South Glendale. And this is an example. Maybe you're showing that it's a good use. I'm saying this is a terrible exemption that was made because we're the ones that hear from it. And if it can be shown to council, 5 of us here that are elected biannually and feel the heat and hear the emails and they grab our sleeves when we're at the events and they say, look, the parking really stinks in South Glendale. We should be the ones who have our necks on the line rather than have a planning administrator make that decision and perhaps in the isolation of the 3rd floor of the, are you on the 2nd floor or the 3rd floor?
1st floor.
1st floor of the Municipal Services Building. So this is something council has to have an active role in. I feel very strongly on that.
Mr. Quintero.
Well, I agree, not as passionately perhaps, but no, seriously, parking in neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods near commercial areas is really dicey in this city. Central, Chevy Chase, Glen Oaks Boulevard, both north and south. So I do think that this should remain within the purview of the city council. Don't feel that way about the core of the downtown, but I do on a lot of these commercial areas where just the slightest change in use in terms of something that seems innocuous like a billiard hall, but the difference between that and a medical lab, perhaps in the evening, could directly impact multifamily neighborhoods or single-family neighborhoods, et cetera. So I agree.
May I just make a correction? Because there seems to be an assumption that right now the city council makes these decisions. Right now, these decisions are made through a public hearing by the hearing officer in a parking reduction permit application. The only difference is that the new process would eliminate the public hearing. It would still be a discretionary review. Right now, they don't come to the city council.
Unless they're appealed by...
Unless they're appealed.
Which they still could be appealed under this process.
And that's a savings of thousands of dollars to the applicant.
And at this point, I think all what we are trying to, the findings on this particular case, just as an example, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that because it's a billiard operation, it operates at night versus the other users operating during the day, so they're able to use and recycle those 69 on-site spaces. So the net impact of the neighborhood is not what it otherwise might seem. 7 more cars parking out in the neighborhood. That happens there as a function of the findings, as a part of the hearing that ultimately gets shared in that hearing and ultimately can be appealed. The balance that we're going forward, and certainly this is a policy decision by a policy-making body, is that we hear from many of the same folks that are tugging on your jacket sleeves, saying it takes so long to get this type of application through because it has to go through that public hearing process, and it's expensive because we charge back the cost for that type of service and that type of review. So to the extent that we hear you when we get the complaint from the business, we also hear you because gravity being what it is and things falling down from this dais to the organization, we try to balance what the impacts are on the residents. And so ultimately we would serve that policy that you would want to create.
So we don't have to guess. This was granted in 2010. So what happened?
There has been actually no problems, no complaints. It has worked fine.
69 spaces is a lot of spaces to fill for a 5,000 square foot billiard hall. That would be a lot of customers, considering most people aren't there solo in a car because it's kind of a activity people do in groups. So I'm not surprised. So here's my comment. Poor businesses in Glendale, they can come in and demonstrate that whatever they're doing is not going to add traffic impact. That's what they have to do. But we're not going to allow staff who knows pretty well at this point what adds impact and what doesn't. We're not going to let them make those findings. Instead, we're going to make them go through this long process and pay thousands and thousands of dollars and take many, many months to get to the same place because staff says these are almost always granted anyway. You're not denying these left and right, right? What percentage of them that come in do you end up granting through the hearing officer?
Very small percentage. Here's the thing, and I don't want to say that the small percentage that we deny are the ones that we have actually advised the applicant to make modifications and they haven't.
So you would have denied those anyway?
We would have denied those anyway.
In other words,
right.
What you're telling us is that you have a process that's streamlined,
yes,
that costs businesses a lot less money and takes a lot less time, and you're confident you're going to end up at the same place because it's not us making those decisions, as my colleagues have implied. It's one of your staff members right now. But we're going to say, you know what, we don't trust, somehow we don't want to streamline it, we don't want to make it cheaper. And now I understand the concerns. We do have we have parking problems, and we have to be very, very sure. But all you're talking about here is streamlining and having the same department making the same decisions, and still it's appealable. I mean, I've heard so many nightmare stories from businesses where they're changing use or they're expanding in some way where they know they're not adding any more parking burden. They can prove it. They can come in and say, we're not hiring one more employee, we're not going to have, any more traffic, parking impact. I believe if they can make that case, that we should make things easier on them because it is tough to do business in the city. And this is a time when we need to support our small businesses. And this is something that's been hurting our small businesses. I mean, I can give other examples where I've seen this in action. There's one that I've talked about a liquor importer in town, and you know who this is. They have a warehouse. and they decide that they want to take very large vats of wine and put it into small vats because it's more efficient, so they're going to put in an automated bottling facility. And this is not adding any employees, not one more employee, but they are doing the right thing, and they come to the city and they say, we want to put this in. And the city says, oh, you're no longer a warehouse, now you're a manufacturer, and you have to have another 15 parking spaces.
Or apply for a parking
Or
variance.
apply for a variance, spend thousands of dollars, and take 6 or 7 months to do this. When you know, and they know, they're not adding any more need for parking. For us not to be able to help them out and give them that variance administratively when you make the findings, to me, it's just bad business. It's just bad for business. And, you know, I understand the concerns, and I think that if you have those concerns at all in the back of your mind that this is going to be bad, then absolutely it needs to go through a public hearing. But in those cases where you know, where it's been demonstrated, I think that this is something that we need to do to help our businesses. And I have heard a lot more complaints from businesses about this than I have for individual uses where you've given those types of permits. Usually when we have complaints, it's businesses who change use without getting a permit. I mean, it's the businesses who morph from one thing and become something completely different that you would never have given them a variance. That's where we tend to hear a lot of complaints. Or older buildings that they just don't have any parking, so, you know, and that have been grandfathered in. But I haven't seen these administrative exceptions that you've given causing a problem. So I'm definitely for this.
Mr. Najarian, rebuttal.
Well, so I misunderstood that this proposal then essentially eliminates a public hearing.
Yes, but it's still a discretionary review.
Discretionary, but it eliminates the voices of people like Margaret Hammond and Carol Jean Felker and concerned residents who want to protect their quality of life and who may really feel that there's a severe traffic impact in the environment, in their neighborhood. And so, just so people know, my businesses are important, but it's the residents of the city of Glendale that elected me, not the businesses. And my loyalty and my dedication and commitment is to the residents of Glendale. So I am against anything that's going to take the residents' voices away from them. That's what democracy is all about. And that's their chance to hear. On an appeal, et cetera, well, they might lose interest and they might be intimidated by such a process. But I think we owe it to our residents, especially in this example, South Glendale. We've had, you know, not to say anything against the car dealerships, but those are businesses too. And if we just give the car dealerships what they want, there would have been no review of the South Glendale strategic plan for parking. So I am definitely in favor of giving the residents the greater voice in this process. And if what you're saying is voting against this would continue to give the residents the greater voice and the greater opportunity to be heard, then I'm definitely against giving the 10% administrative exception to the administrator.
Would you like to say something, Mr. Ghani?
Oh, no, I think this is a policy decision for the council. Whatever decision you make, we'll be implementing that. This is a suggestion, and we operate at the desire of the council.
So a question for these hearings that you've had.
Freeman.
These hearings that you've had, you know, we're talking about relatively small, what are you talking about, 3 spaces? You're talking about small amounts of spaces. How many people come to these hearings generally? Are we talking where you're having crowds that all of a sudden are going to be denied? So we've heard
I don't know. Does anybody know that one hearing, if it attracted anyone? I know that since the hearing and the decision, we have had no problems with that. I know that. I don't know how many people attended the hearing.
No, I mean in general, how many
In
people?
general, not very many. For the parking reduction permits, not very many, unless they are, you know, in a very small say if it's happening on Cañada,
right,
where there's a little strip of commercial.
But would you be giving that? Would you be giving that administratively?
No, we're very cautious about this. If anything, we've been accused of being too harsh on the businesses in that area because we know it's predominantly residential. But really, we will operate at the desire of and the direction of the council.
Mr. Sinanian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have a sort of a question that will shape my final take on this. Most recently, as an example, much like the example that Councilmember Friedman brought, there was a certain cake house that wanted to merely install a refrigeration unit. It wasn't going to add any employees, wasn't going to, there was no demonstrable...
I know that case.
You know that case also?
I do.
And from what I understand, they're still in limbo. They're still unable to add their refrigeration
In that case, they
unit.
have both building and land use
So would they be saved from the horrible process that they're
on
still
the parking
ongoing?
issue? They would. Yes.
They would.
On the parking issue, they would.
Okay, thank you.
On the building code issue, I don't know, but on the parking issue, they would.
Because there's an example where it's not merely the business who's benefiting, it's the residents who patronize the business, the residents who use that business on a daily basis that are beneficiaries of a more streamlined process.
In fact, in that case, in that particular case that Mr. Sinanian is referring to, we got letters from the residents telling us, please loosen up.
Yeah.
And we said, we can't. Our code does not allow us to.
Okay, my comment, if we pass this, is the public going to be shut out? Are they going to not have any knowledge until they see it and then come down and complain to the council?
That's the part that I would like to say something about. We take pride in working in step with the public. And Mr. Najarian was correct that years ago in the planning department there were activities that were not, and I must say this specifically, people were not according to what the code said. The problems were people were actually extending their authority beyond what the code gave them. They, in fact, approved things that required public hearings without public hearings, etc. We have worked very hard to restore our credibility with the council and with the public. We worked very close with them, and the last person who would want to have our decisions be ridiculed by being appealed and questioned would be us. That is extremely important to our staff, and I take pride in that. That said, whatever decision you make, we will respect and follow.
Well, that's what I said last week about credibility that you have. And we rely on you using that good judgment in your department. At least we're not hearing of the past years or so complaints like we used to have in here, wondering what is staff doing. And I'll say one thing. Since she said it in a public setting, I was on a panel with the mayor of Burbank, and she says she has tried to steal you over to Burbank, and I told her, keep your hands off. Now, Burbank thinks enough of you to want you over there, and you told her no, because you're credible, you do a good job here, we hope we treat you fairly. And I'm going to vote for this because I'm relying on what you have done and what you see on a daily basis. So where do we stand on this exception? Up or down? What's the vote? No?
I'm for it.
I'm for it also.
Mr. Condero?
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Okay, and I'm okay with it.
I'm against.
And one against. Okay, carries. So we're down to option 2. Somebody?
Do we need a motion?
Wait, I'm trying to find it.
If I may, Mr.
Yes,
Mayor.
what option, how are we doing this?
Well, you have an ordinance that was introduced. I need to read into the record the changes that were made previously. The sections
and then we'll
to
take
30.
a motion on what you read
Right.
down.
So the motion would be to introduce the ordinance or to adopt the ordinance as introduced, except section 30.44.020 E. The second sentence would be revised to read that this deviation shall not apply to floor area ratio standards or number of required parking spaces. And subdivision F of that section, the first sentence would read a maximum 3 space or 10% reduction, whichever is greater in the number of total parking spaces required in conjunction with the change of a commercial or industrial use in an existing building. So with those changes, the council could move to adopt the ordinance.
I will move the ordinance with the provisions and changes made by the city attorney.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Council members Friedman,
Yes.
Najarian,
No.
Quintero,
Yes.
Sinanian,
Yes.
and Mayor Weaver.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, staff. What is next, please?
Item 8A, Director of Community Services and Parks, regarding design approval for Glendale's 2014 Rose Float entry at 8A1 is a motion approving the design. Let's be neighbors.
Oh, here we go. It's funny, we don't have any TV networks here for this one.
Which is a little bit of a surprise, sir, considering that we've had so much media over the last few days since the
just
story
this
was
morning.
picked up. And just this morning, I understand you gave an interview today.
I did a CBS at 1:30, and Mr. Lorenz said that we had over 1 million hits on Google in the morning, and I even got online and found editorials in the Gainesville, Florida paper about our float. It's gone nationwide. It's viral.
It indeed has gone viral. Yes, sir.
With that, Mr. Duran?
I would just suggest before bringing or allowing Jess to walk you through the design. As you know, the council has approved our participation in this, our 100th year in the Rose Parade. We wanted to showcase less the buildings that identify in Glendale, and rather this notion of neighborliness, this notion of the quality of life that we enjoy, and the balance that we seek to preserve with the natural environment around us. Environmental sustainability being one of the council's priorities, and you can't deny the fact that we have had a great deal of well-publicized interaction with the local wildlife, most of that being positive, and so we hope to depict that through our good friends at Phoenix Design, that it would be demonstrated here in this design concept that we bring to you and humbly submit for your endorsement. So, Jess, is there anything beyond that one?
We do have Phoenix. We have Phoenix decorating here, right?
Yes.
Yes, we do. Thank you, Mr. Ochoa. Mayor Weaver, members of the City Council. This year's Rose Parade theme is Dreams Come True. This year will mark the City of Glendale's 100th consecutive year in the parade. The city contracts with Phoenix Decorating Incorporated to design and build the city's float, as Mr. Ochoa alluded to. And Phoenix Decorating is one of the preeminent float builders in the country and have a long history with the Rose Parade and the Tournament of Roses, which is very key to understanding what the Tournament of Roses committee's requirements are. So working very closely with Phoenix Decorating and their artists, a design has been developed and is now being recommended by staff for approval by the City Council. And of course, it's depicted in the slide and the rendering on the screen. The name and theme of our float that is recommended is Let's Be Neighbors, which portrays some of the more widely seen members of the wild animal community who also call Glendale their home. The float suggests that it is not only desirable but possible for those who live in the wildland-urban interface to live together in harmony. The float is representative of the juxtaposition of Glendale's residential neighborhoods, abutting the wilderness neighborhoods and the open space where people and wildlife can coexist, as the city does have over 5,000 acres of open space between the San Rafael Hills and hiking trails above the sports complex, to the Verdugo Mountains and hiking trails above Brand Park, and of course to the San Gabriel Mountains at Dugmajan Wilderness Park, all within the city limits of Glendale. As you can see, the native inhabitants that are featured in the float include a coyote, a California mule deer, a red-tailed hawk, a North American raccoon, a western gray squirrel, an American goldfinch bird, a skunk, just a plain old skunk, and of course the star of the float is the California black bear, which is depicted as having the likeness of the infamous Meatball the bear, which has become somewhat of a Glendale icon. There will be a lot of detail that will go into the sculpting of the animals, and animation will include the bear bopping in and out of the trash can, potentially with a spinning lid on his head. The float will accommodate 10 riders, and the float is meant to be fun, it's meant to be animated, it's meant to be representative of Glendale, or a Glendale icon, which is represented by the wildlife in Glendale, and to promote something that's important to the Glendale community. In terms of our fundraising efforts, unlike Cruise Night, where we exceeded our fundraising goals and where we're able to offset 100% of the budget for that event, thus far we are falling short of our goal of raising half the cost of the float, or $75,000, but our fundraising efforts will continue. And along these lines, even though the float is already designed, there continues to be opportunities for the corporate sponsors and corporate sponsorship benefits. We are also continuing to promote the community sponsorship and engagement, where for a donation of $25, Glendale residents will be eligible to be entered into a drawing to win 2 tickets to ride on the float on New Year's Day. We do have representatives from Phoenix here to answer any questions regarding any technical aspects of the float design or process. Otherwise, I'm glad to answer any or to take any comments or questions that council members might
Okay, I
have.
got one because CBS asked me the question and I couldn't answer it. Who got the name? Who picked the float? Who was on the committee? And I said, I don't know. I had nothing to do with it. So if you could answer
Ostensibly,
that.
the committee is the city council. We had hoped with the fundraising plan, such as it is, to have additional corporate sponsorship, but without having received that major sponsorship donation at this point in time, and wanting and having to move forward with the float design to give Phoenix the appropriate amount of time to begin sculpting so that way we can hit all of our milestones, we pulled together from Phoenix a number of different renderings, made some suggestions, and are bringing it here to you tonight.
Who's we? That's what they're asking me.
That would be Jess Duran, myself, and Mr. Lofthouse from Phoenix Design.
Okay, that's fine because it's a lovely float. I would just hope in future years to get into the arts community of Glendale to help do what the two of you apparently have done on your own. This would be nice. Could Mr. Lofthouse come up and say a few words? Do you mind, Chris? Tell them a little about the size and the animation and whatever will go into the float.
Well, we decided to keep the float within the 35-foot range, and I wanted the opportunity, and we wanted to do a lot more animation this year, and we wanted to make the animals all animated. So we've got some surprises with the bear. All the animals will be waving and swinging and interacting. We are also going to add as a feature, and we've had very big success before. We're going to add a real coyote, and we're going to have a handlebar on board on one of the benches, and we're going to put a real coyote on board. I think it's as a real animal, and it really draws the crowd. The crowds like the real animals, so that's one of the things.
That's your insurance coverage on the
Absolutely
on the coyote. That's good because we have 10 riders on there.
So it's with the budget we had, it's given us the opportunity to have the freedom to do all the things this year we wanted to do for the 100th entry of the Glendale Float, and we're very honored to be a part of it.
So a lot of animation. I think you said the raccoon's going to wave.
The raccoon's going to wave. I don't want to give it all away.
No,
We gave it all
that's
away.
enough.
We gave most of it away this morning when I got up and saw the KTLA news.
And my daughter called me and said, turn on news. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. It was already on.
But we think I think that's great. I think that's the kind of reaction that people are having to it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Let's go nationwide. The good Lord moves in mysterious ways, and I never thought that it would take off like that. People have associated with meatball so strongly. Just got to make sure that snout matches meatball.
Absolutely.
I pulled down
We're
pictures.
pretty good at that.
Because that isn't exactly like meatball, and if you don't, we'll get the emails.
There's plenty of pictures to go by.
Yeah, this isn't meatball. He has a different snout, that kind of thing. And how tall is it?
It's approximately 27 feet tall. The tree will go actually what we call over height. Normal height would be about 16 feet, and we're going to take the tree so that we have a nice backdrop as the float goes down the street.
This will be one of our tallest in many years.
Yes,
Get up there and do that tree.
It's going to be a beautiful entry. Good outdoor float.
And you'll say to the end what the music will be. You wouldn't know the music now that'll go on the float.
We don't know the music now, and that's something that we're going to have some fun with too. I think there's a lot of
I know
great tunes out there.
you guys come up with some great music to put on the float.
Yes.
My colleagues have any questions? Yeah.
I hate to be a spoil sport.
But you will.
But does anyone out there find it ironic that under the caption of Let's Be Neighbors, with the centerpiece of Meatball, our former resident, who was deported from Glendale in chains and is now in a Colorado wildlife prison, that we have taken upon ourselves to highlight him and to imply that we love animals that go through our garbage.
He's not in Colorado, is he? I thought he was down in San Diego.
Where is he? San Diego.
San Diego.
Not
Still
running
in-
free. He's in that
still in
wildlife
California.
preserve with the wildlife Guantanamo, as some.
But he has a lot of
I mean,
memories.
it's cute. He was cute, but I just see some irony in that. I'm sorry.
But it'll be interesting to decorate, which brings the point that come November or so, we'll be recruiting volunteers to work on the float. We'll have over 600 workers as usual. Last year I had about 40 high schools, Glendale and all the surrounding communities sent people over to work on it. Kids all get community service hours, anywhere between 8th grade and 12th and on up to 80.
And Mr. Mayor, that's something that we take pride at Phoenix Decorating, and this is not my float, this is your float, and this is the community's float, and we take a lot of pride in having you could be able to come down and rally around your float.
Oh, the kids are going to love doing this, all these different animals.
Absolutely. A lot of detail, a lot of work.
Yeah. Ms. Friedman.
Mr. Najarian, would you rather that they altered the design and put Meatball in chains? What about putting a cat in the coyote's jaws? A little more realistic. I actually take it as imploring us to get along with the wildlife, and not saying that we always do, but sort of saying we need to. I think that's the spirit that I looked at it as, that we're in a wildlife interface zone, most of us in Glendale. We do have wildlife in the area, and let's be neighbors. I think it's a really cute float and very topical, and really the first one I've seen in a long time that I think really speaks to people. That isn't, not that we've had bad floats in the past, but we've had a lot of floats that are kind of fluff pieces, like, hey, look, we have this, we have that. But this one kind of says something, which is a direction I would like to see this in the future. And I think that's why it's getting so much attention. I think it struck a nerve with people, where people are saying, yeah, this is an issue, and we do, a lot of us would like to work it out with the wildlife and live side by side with them.
Mm-hmm. I think regardless of where Meatball ended up, we are doing him a great tribute.
Well, yeah, and this community didn't let Meatball get trapped and killed, which does happen to bears. This community rallied to save Meatball and raised a lot of money and sent him to a place where we're hoping he'll have a nice life, a nice bear life in captivity. So
My dad used to say that about our dog, actually. Get sent him to a farm and play with all the other dogs.
well, Meatloaf has been visited, so we know he's at least a bear that looks like him.
If you'll notice, the skunk is
He's on a hunger strike back there, feeding by a tube.
The skunk is on the off-camera side.
So I think it's nice, and I'd just like to say that I would like to see future
You can only
floats
see his tail.
to kind of go in this direction of really trying to say something. It doesn't have to be a giant issue, but kind of saying something that resonates with the community. I think that's why this float is getting the attention it's getting. So it really is making a statement about something that in some ways is kind of controversial in some ways, but I think it's a nice design. Now, what does concern me is the fundraising. I didn't go into this thinking the city was going to be bearing the large brunt, bear without any irony, bearing the large brunt of the cost for this float. So that's a concern for me. Maybe not for this year because we've committed, but going forward, depending on what happens with this, might impact my decision about the float in subsequent years. So that is a concern of mine, given the financial times that we're in, and even though things are getting better, we still have a lot of cuts that we have to a lot of our services, and we need to have that painful discussion at some point about what our priorities are. But that's not the discussion for tonight. The discussion is the design, and I think it's really, really, really nice, and I think it's going to be a very nice float, and hopefully it will get that attention as it goes down Colorado Boulevard.
Well, now that we have a rendering, it'll be easier to sell it to sponsors.
That's right.
Mr. Quintero?
Yeah, I also like the design, but I am concerned in terms of ultimately what the city is going to wind up paying. I think once the corporate sponsorship sees sees the float itself, I think it'll be easier to raise money, but how much are we ultimately going to wind up paying?
Well, our target was 70,000. We're at 10,000, a little over 10. We're hopeful that now that we're past cruise night, whereas we paid for that entirely through sponsorships and registrations, that folks will turn that benefactor dollar towards the float.
It'd be nice if those $1 million hits on Google, if each of those people would send one lousy dollar in, we'd have $1 million. Just think about it. Just $1.
Can we do that? Can we put it in?
I don't know. It crossed my mind. I heard another little rumor that since he was eating meatballs from Costco, that somebody's going to be calling Costco to see if they want to be a sponsor. We'll work the whole system. We got 5-6 months to get sponsors, so we won't be sitting still. It'll be fun. Right, Chris?
Will be a lot of fun. And I thank Mayor Weaver and members of the council. I look forward to seeing you folks later on in the year and helping us complete this project.
We're welcome to come over and see the progress.
Anytime.
Right?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, is there a motion on 8A1?
Move the item.
Second.
Thank you. Other comments? Roll call.
Council members Friedman,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Sinanian,
Yes.
Mayor Weaver.
Aye. Okay, students stand by to volunteer in November. It'll be online. You'll be hearing about it. News press will be writing articles, they assured me. So we'll get plenty of notice out to all of you. Okay, what is next, please? Thank you for coming, Chris.
Item 8B,
Yes.
Acting Director of Public Works regarding upgrade of the city's faster wind fleet management software to faster web fleet management software. 8B1 is a resolution dispensing of competitive bidding and authorizing execution of an agreement with CCG Systems, Inc., DBA Faster Asset Solutions for a cost of $147,000.
Staff need a report?
Simply that we have basically a sole source type program where we are looking to upgrade our existing software to go to the faster web fleet management. At this point, we are happy with the software that we have, the program. We'd like a little more capability. The vendor is migrating over to the faster web fleet management. It is more cost effective for us to migrate with them as opposed to go in a different direction. All of the system is in alignment with our training, with our systems, with our performance management measurements, and so we would ask the council to allow us to move forward with the faster asset solutions. And Mr. Galanian has answers.
Yes. Any questions to Mr. Galanian? Or?
Yeah, you can guess what I'm going to ask. So we're getting rid of the competitive bidding process yet again, and I appreciate the explanation as to why that's happening. And, you know, there are legitimate reasons, but nevertheless, I just feel uncomfortable with the fact that too often, you know, we're getting these contracts in front of us, contract renewals, and we're getting rid of the competitive bidding process. I mean, I'm reading the explanation. If we go out to bid and find a new vendor, it is, quote, very likely that our data will not transfer successfully, end quote. Or the cost to go to a brand new vendor and system while maintaining faster win is, quote, anticipated to be much higher. I mean, there's really no certainty. It's not like we know that's what's going to happen. And yet, when we give up the competitive bidding process, we're giving up the opportunity to know for sure whether that's going to be the case or not. It's almost, you know, feels like we're being held hostage to the software. Okay, well, we're stuck with this software. We can't go to another one because it may or may not cause problems.
Certainly, alternative 3 on your list of alternatives is to do an RFP or to go out to bid. We can do that with complete understanding of what the sensitivity is and appreciating that most certainly. All I can tell you is from our experience and working through these systems, this is what we believe to be the best use of time and effort. But truly, as a matter of policy, if the council wants us to go out to bid, we have that as alternative 3 of the 4. It's your pleasure, sir.
We have a motion. We want to run it and see how far it goes. Anybody want to make a motion on 8B1? Okay, then.
The item. See where it goes.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, let's do a roll call and see where we're at. Roll call, please.
Council members Friedman.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Sinanian.
Yes.
Mayor Weaver.
All right. Thank you. Okay, next, please.
Item 8C, Acting Director of Public Works regarding specialized miscellaneous parts and labor for city-owned refuse trucks, Ben Hustlers, and Perkins Rotary Tipper. At 8C1 is a resolution dispensing with competitive bidding and authorizing a 5-year contract with Ray Gaskin Service, Inc. in the amount of $300,000.
And begging Mr. Sinani.
So I'm looking to Mr. Sinani for a comment. You want to?
Yeah, I mean, same concern, except this one is a much larger contract. And again, I'm looking for certainty that what we're settling for is certainly better. It's for sure better, and it's the better option in terms of the amount of money that we're committing ourselves to and the service. Service I'm less concerned with because apparently there's a proven record. But now it says, again, the report says
the only.
It says Ray Gaskin Service is the parts and service dealer for Packmore and then lists a bunch of truck companies, I guess. Now, when we say it's the service dealer, does that mean
The factory-approved service dealer
is
for
it
these
the only
parts.
factory-approved service dealer?
In our region, in Fontana, I think the next closest one is up north. And so to the extent that we're trucking out pieces and parts for work, to the extent our folks can either have it delivered or if need be an urgency, go pick it up and bring it back. We can do that ourselves versus having to have it shipped. We can make sure that our mechanics are that much more productive by not having to wait on whatever delay might come from having the provider be several hundred miles away versus 40 miles away.
So I just want confirmation of that it means what it says. It is the dealer in this area.
Yeah, they're out in Inland Empire.
Okay. Well,
It's just, Mr. Congressman, if for 1 minute I thought on any of these items came up that we could go competitive bidding, I'd be there with you. But I've sat here 17 years, and
sure,
I know when we get to these ones where it's best just to go with the current one, savings of time or cost or sole source or whatever. That's ones where I roll over and say, okay, we got to go it that way. But I'm with you in the competitive bidding, always, if we can do that. Anyhow, is there a motion on 8C1?
I'll move it.
Second.
Roll call.
Council members Friedman.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Sinanian.
Yes.
Mayor Weaver.
All right. Next, please.
Item 8D, City Manager regarding designation of a voting delegate and alternates for the League of California Cities Annual Conference. At 8D1 is a motion to designate a voting delegate and 2 alternates for the League of California Cities Annual Conference to be held on September 18 through 20, 2013.
Mr. Ochoa.
Yes, sir. The rules of League California Cities require that we actually have a resolution with specific names as to who will be Glendale's voting delegate and alternate or alternates. And so with Councilmember Friedman and Councilmember Sinanian attending on behalf of the council, and one of our analysts, Christine Powers, also going to this particular legislative conference, we would ask that you select a voting delegate and 2 alternates.
We already have them.
I'll nominate Mr. Sinanian.
Or do we have to vote on each
Second.
one? Can we just
Mr. Mayor, you can take them one at a time, or you can nominate them all on one
Ms.
motion.
Friedman and Mr. Sinanian and Christine Powers?
But yeah, right. But you need to name specifically who the voting delegate is, specifically who the first alternate is, specifically who the second alternate is. So,
Want to name her voting?
Certainly. Councilmember Friedman, nominate you, and thank you. I was going to yield to you as a senior.
Magnanimous.
citizen, but
Would you like to?
so just so we're
give
clear.
us your-
I nominated you first.
So, thank you, and I think I need to nominate you as the alternate.
Oh, I see. As the alternate.
Okay.
Fine.
And also Christine also?
She's not
Sabun?
here.
Okay, so I would like to nominate.
Right.
Nominate her.
So
Okay.
the motion would be Councilmember Sinani as the voting delegate, Councilmember Friedman as the first alternate, and Ms. Powers as the
Well, you're
second
reversing the
alternate.
roles.
I think she's back there.
Oh, there she is. Hi, Christine.
She is there.
Very grateful for the opportunity.
Okay, with that, is there a motion?
Can I?
Make the motion as I just read it, Mr. Sinani.
I'll move then.
Second.
Roll call.
Council members Friedman.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Sinanian.
Yes.
Mayor Weaver.
Aye. Okay, what's next?
At item 6 is oral communications. This is following the business agenda. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Council may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The city manager may refer the matter to the appropriate department for investigation and report.
Okay, first speaker is Faith Han Taragna. Faith? Faith. Oh, I guess Faith left. She had no faith in a short meeting. Okay, second speaker, Greg James. Followed by Anush, and I won't even try to say the last name. Did I say it right, Greg?
Gray.
Great. Sorry.
Gray James, Glendale. It was during the previous administration that Mr. Sinanian's fondness for hate speech came to light. In response to this, a definitive declaration was made. Glendale does not tolerate hate speech. Now, this may not prevent violence, but it defines a very clear parameter about where Glendale stands and about all efforts to follow should the line be crossed. The current administration has set a different tone. You asked us to elect you and then sit there telling us you'd be perfectly happy if we didn't exist. When Mr. Sinanian scammed his way to the dais, he would be the one protected while we were being told to can it. No statement from the dais was ever made about his words, while us attempting to quote his words was met with exception. Over and over, Mr. Sinanian has been the protected entity, while we've remained a tolerated piss on nostalgia's parade. The new parameter has been clearly demarcated. If you cross the line, you become the mayor's protected protege. I remind you all, Mr. Sinanian's revelations would come after he took a seat on the dais, and all were minus repercussion. How many times have I stood here and said members from the LGBT community were too afraid to come here for fear of retaliation? Please grasp that statement. You have residents of Glendale who may be very happily going about their lives, but still are too afraid to come talk to you because of one of its members. They see what's happening here, and they are afraid. Mr. Sinanian has 7,000 plus fans, and every day you sit on the side of hate is another day you give his fans permission to have at it. This is not a reach. This is what we know from experience. On April 24th, Glendale News Press ran the article, "Glendale City Council Members Ready to Move On." This article was in response to Mr. Sinanian's initial admission, and though the admission would be held up to public scrutiny as minimal and incomplete, an olive branch would be extended by many on the promise of actions to be determined at a later date. In fact, all the many conciliatory gestures of good faith Mr. Sinanian has received have been met with no actual conciliatory actions from Mr. Sinanian. On this same day, April 24th, while everyone was reaching out to Mr. Sinanian and protecting Mr. Sinanian, writing softcore newspaper articles about Mr. Sinanian's personal journey, requiring not a single action from Mr. Sinanian, and making no statements at all condemning Mr. Sinanian, Glendale resident Joshua West would be murdered. Mr. West was kidnapped, beaten, shot several times, and then run over by a tow truck. The murder would be covered by Glendale News Press on May 9th, and on the 19th of June, it would be deemed a hate crime. Mr. West was murdered because he was gay.
Next speaker, Anush. I can't pronounce the last name. It starts with the letter D. Oh, boy. Can't wait to hear you say your last name. Anush.
Jabashian.
Sorry, I couldn't have got that.
Honorable Mayor, Council members, staff, and community members. My name is Anush Jabashian, and I am a longtime resident of Glendale. Every day I cross the busy intersection of Wilson Avenue and Belmont Street. It is a two-way stop with 2 oncoming lanes of traffic and 2 pedestrian walkways. Over the last few months, I've witnessed countless near collisions when vehicles attempt to cross 2 lanes of traffic, ignoring the safety of other drivers, pedestrians, and themselves. This intersection is 1 block away from a public park and in a neighborhood full of young children. The crosswalks are not lit, and it is very difficult to see pedestrians at night. I believe it would be in the public's best interest to make the intersection a four-way stop and to install flashing lights on the crosswalks. These simple measures could prevent serious accidents and ensure public safety. Thank you.
Thank you. I think staff, we heard about another another cross street on Wilson 2 weeks ago. Staff was going to look like. I drive that street every day. I know they go pretty recklessly. If we have them, we'll be looking at Wilson. Those four-way stops, what would a four-way stop cost? How many $100,000?
Mr. Mayor, just the installation of stop signs?
Yeah, off the top of your head, a four-way stop.
Probably $2,500 to $3,000.
Only that much? From installation, everything?
Yes. So how much?
$2,500.
Oh.
I thought it was
Just the street markings and the signage. The
signals.
Oh, wait.
Signals, yeah.
Signal.
Signals are expensive.
Electrified signals are considerably more expensive.
That's what I was going to say.
$250,000.
Okay. So if you get one, it'll be a stop and go kind. But we'll be looking at, because we can't have the traffic stopping every block along the way, but we're studying it. Thank you for coming. Next speaker, Stephen Zekania. Did I get it right? Good.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, staff, and community members. My name is Stefan Gazakanian. I am a sophomore at Duke University, but I was born and raised in Glendale. I was a freshman at Hoover High School when a young girl was killed on the crosswalk as she crossed Glenwood Road towards Toll Middle School. I witnessed all the changes made to prevent such a horrible incident from happening again. A divider was added on Glenwood Road, a stop sign and stoplight were added in front of the crosswalk between Toll and Hoover, and more cross guards were brought to man the crosswalks. However, there is still one big hole left. This seemingly minor, yet potentially devastating problem is the crosswalk between the upper half of Virginia Avenue and Glenwood Road. Virginia Avenue splits at Glenwood Road, so the lower and upper halves create two separate blocks. While there are cross guards and a stop sign at the intersection between Glenwood Road and the lower half of Virginia Avenue, neither of these precautions are in place for the upper half of Virginia Avenue. I find this to be a very big problem, especially when children rush out of class and are constantly crossing the street without adult supervision or a cross light. Therefore, a driver must wait for the students to pass before he or she can make a left turn on Virginia Avenue. The first problem is that oftentimes there's a traffic jam because drivers who want to make a left turn must wait for not only the kids to cross, but therefore to be no oncoming traffic. When I picked up my brother from school, I would get stuck in traffic at this intersection and at the blocks prior to it, so I decided to start timing the wait to make a left turn. The longest I recorded was 73 seconds. Though I personally don't mind waiting, this situation creates traffic, especially because the gap between the intersection and the previous stop sign can only fit 4 cars and causes a domino effect of traffic towards the previous intersections. However, the bigger problem is keeping our children safe in an unregulated situation. In my opinion, this is simply another tragedy waiting to happen. All it takes is one driver in a rush or a second of misjudgment. However, I believe this can easily be prevented. One fix is bringing in a third crossguard to serve this crosswalk. Additional traffic will not occur if he or she is synchronized with the other 2 crossguards. And so those are the ones that are at the crosswalks for Glenwood Road and the lower half of Virginia. This will ensure children's safety. Another solution could be placing a flashing light for the pedestrians crossing to serve as a more eye-catchy warning for drivers. It is up to you as City Council leaders to address this issue, but something must be done at this crosswalk because we cannot and should not have another tragedy, especially when we have spotted the problem. Thank you very much.
Stephen, what are you studying at Duke?
I'm a pre-med student. Thank you.
Well, staff has taken notes on this, so they'll analyze it. Thank you for coming. Okay, next speaker, Christina Terzan.
Honorable Mayor...
Name for the record, please.
Oh, Christine Terzian.
Got it.
Honorable Mayor, City Council members, City staff, and public. My name is Christina Terzian, and I am an intern with the Armenian National Committee of America Glendale chapter. Poverty has consistently been a prominent aspect of society. There appears to be little chance of eliminating poverty at any time in the near future. Nevertheless, there have been positive steps taken in our community that have elevated some of the consequences facing individuals in poverty. Low-income families face many challenges, and programs have been made available in the city that have lessened the burdens. The National Low-Income Housing Coalition explains that when families spend more than 30% of their income on housing, they run the risk of not being able to afford other necessities like food and transportation. This is why I would like to commend City Council and members of Habitat for Humanity for improving Glendale's 8th Habitat for Humanity project for low-income home buyers. This project will not only help individuals struggling financially, but it will promote economic and social integration while building the community. Overall, the plan to help build condominiums for low-income home buyers will assist families in regaining their self-esteem while also accommodating needs. Thank you.
Good comments. Thanks for coming. Next speaker, Mike Mohill.
It's 5 minutes. Still says 3 minutes.
3 or 5?
Oral communications.
5. It's oral communication.
But the meter here says 5. 3.
Okay, I'll change it.
Change it to 5.
Thank you. Good evening, council members. My name is Mike Mohill. Last time I appeared before the City Council, I spoke about the 2013 Dog and Pony Show of Glendale Water and Power Company, instigated by our City Council, a show in which the GWP customers will be seeing their electric rates increase between 30% and 70% over the next 5 years. Also, from 2007 to 2015, water rates will have gone up 51%. I guess Councilman Najarian and Councilman Friedman could not defend their public records when I stated to the voters and local merchants at candidate forums and on the campaign mailers, if they wanted to have their electric rates and water rates increased, fees and taxes increased, as well as new bonds, please, by all means, support and vote for the incumbent candidates, and the voters did. As usual, Councilman Najarian said I was spewing out misinformation. My concepts are all wrong, rejected by the public, council, and city staff. Furthermore, the public should get together and fight my misinformation. What misinformation, Mr. Najarian? Rather than staying on the topic of the Dog and Pony Show, GWP, electrical rate increases, you attacked me personally, just like your old friend, John Jamin did, who today is facing a criminal court date in September. Mr. Najarian, it's you said you had received complaints by the merchants against me. By my strong-arm tactics, they feared my retribution. What retribution? You certainly must be joking. Mr. Najarian, it was you, sir, who strong-armed the merchants. You intimidated them to remove my posters. I have no power. I was not an incumbent. I was a good salesman with a great message that resonated with the merchants who want to place my posters in their windows. Businesses were approached by you to remove my posters, and you were not going to frequent them. You, sir, were the intimidator, not I. Mrs. Friedman. Hello, Mrs. Friedman. Okay? Not paying attention. You said we have campaign laws that limit campaign contributions to $1,000 for an individual or group. You said, ma'am, you had to receive only about $1,000 each from Glendale Police Officers Association, firefighters, city manager, and city employees. That's only about $4,000. Mrs. Freeman is not correct and does not understand campaign laws and limits. Unions, Mrs. Freeman, have independent expenditure and have unlimited, and I underline the word unlimited, campaign contributions legally and to their chosen candidates, but are still a conflict of interest. As you see the PowerPoint on the window, up here, you can see Mrs. Freeman, okay, ladies and gentlemen, from public records as of March 31st, are the independent expenditures from campaign contributions by our city unions. The firefighters, Mrs. Freeman, gave you approximately $3,500 in door hangers, $4,000 in advertising in Glendale News Press, about $4,700 for phone bank for your for voting. Please get out to vote. Mr. Nigerian, from the firefighters union, you got $4,000 for door hangers, $4,000 in advertising. Mrs. Freeman, you got the most. Mrs. Freeman, you got about $5,000 from the Police Officers Association. Mr. Nigerian, $5,000. Glendale Managers Association, $1,000 for each Freeman and Nigerian. Total independent expenditures, ladies and gentlemen, $18,600 for Mrs. Freeman and $14,000 for Mr. Nigerian. Mayor Weaver, why do you always seem to defend the Police Officers Association? Do you defend them? Because in your 2011 campaign, they contributed about $8,600. Let me repeat myself, $8,600 in independent expenditures for your election. Pay-to-play politics? My name is Mike Mohill.
Mr. Weaver?
Well, if you'd like to say something, go ahead.
Sure. I just think that Mr. Mohill needs to be clear. In this presentation, he was a little clearer about what it means to receive something. He had stated, I received a certain amount of money. I was not handed that money by any of these associations. They spent money on my behalf, but I, according to the law and according to practice, was not able to control how they spent that. And it's true that the Supreme Court allows not just unions, but corporations, PACs, to spend money on campaigns as long as the recipient doesn't direct any of that money. That's absolutely true. Now, just to get down to the brass, sort of the bottom line, I'm proud to have had the support of the Police Officers Association and the Police and the Firefighters Association. They've been great players in the negotiations over the past several years since I've been on this council. I'm very proud of the concessions that they've made for the city and the way that they've conducted themselves in the negotiation process, and I have absolutely no shame about them supporting me. In fact, I'm proud of it, and I think that both of those groups and the individuals that they represent, which is the men and women who are police officers and our firefighters, do a great job under many times under very difficult circumstances. So I'm happy they supported me. I didn't know that they supported me more than they supported Mr. Nigerian. Take that. That was actually a surprise to me. But I just think that the public needs to be clear that I didn't receive $13,000 or $15,000 from them. I never saw that money. It never passed through me. I didn't know that they were spending it or how they spent it. They did spend the money, but it was not a campaign contribution to me. So I think, I'm glad you made that clearer this time. That's the only point I was trying to make to the public. What was it, last week or the week before?
I know the feeling when, I guess it was in 11, I was somewhere and somebody called me and says, did you see the brochure the police put out for you? And I says, what brochure? Well, they have a brochure. I called home and says, is there a brochure there? I didn't even know what they had done. That's their option to do it. Okay, next speaker, Lorraine Mohill.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Lorraine Mohill. Mr. Najarian, I listened from home to last week's City Council meeting and was, needless to say, quite disturbed. Instead of responding to Mike's bringing up electric and water rate increases, fees and taxes, as well as new bonds, you changed the subject completely to demean his character and reputation by personally saying that he had strong-armed the merchants. Strong-arming basically is to use physical force or coercion. Then you had the nerve to say you had received calls claiming that some of these merchants feared retribution from Mike. I was astonished by this slanderous statement without an ounce of truth or evidence. What magical powers could he possibly possess to make these owners fear retribution? When campaigning, I truly was proud of Mike for being able to place about 150 posters in store windows throughout the city. But I should not have been surprised since he worked as a successful salesman for nearly 27 years for a major corporation. Mike was personable, well-liked, and respected by both his peers and customers. He was well-versed on his product line while all the time listening to the needs of his customers, never ever selling based on his commission percentage, but rather on fulfilling his customers' wants. One day I was curious to see how Mike was able to speak to complete strangers and convince them to put so many of his posters on their windows. So I accompanied him. Mike entered each business, large or small, and asked only for the owner. Mike would then introduce himself, and in less than 5 minutes of conversation, they would tell him he could place his poster in their window because they liked his message. He accomplished this task by asking the owners if they had any concerns about the city and their business, just as he did with the residents. When they responded, most of them would say everything is expensive and they were having a very hard time making ends meet. Most of them would say the cost of doing business in Glendale was prohibitive. Too many fees, such as permit fees, outside dining fees, exorbitant signage fees, to advertise their business, water rate and electric rate increases. Mike was a good listener. He would inform them he was a community advocate running for council to speak for the small businesses and residents, and tried to be instrumental in reducing the fees and water and electric rates for all businesses and residents. He also informed the merchants that the two incumbent candidates, Mrs. Friedman and Mr. Najarian, were on record that after the April election they planned to introduce an ordinance to raise electrical rates. Additionally, he informed them that city unions had given the incumbents thousands of dollars. Although legal, this was pay-to-play politics and definitely a conflict of interest. Mike further stated the electrical rate increases and new bond obligations would help pay for the high, unfunded salaries and pensions of the city union workers. The government pensions were absorbing most of the city's money. The store owners overwhelmingly were glad somebody was actually listening and interested in them and wanted to represent them since they felt they had no voice. After that time, if the store was receptive to his message, Mike would then say, "With your permission, may I place my poster in your store window?" The answer was most often, "Certainly. Put up 2 posters." You see, Councilman Najarian, as the good salesman he was before retiring, he brought those skills to this task. Interestingly, though, during the election, I was in a business that had been located in Glendale for a long time. When I entered the store, one of the employees came up to me and said they were sorry they had to remove Mike's poster. I said I felt badly as well, since it was in such a great location, but that I understood oftentimes people do not want to become too political. "Oh," she said, "not so. That was not the reason we removed it. The councilman came by and said if we did not remove it, he would not frequent our business." I said, "Which councilman?" And she said, "Mr. Najarian." I said, "Are you certain?" And she said, "Most definitely." Mr. Najarian, this was not our only encounter of this sort. You, sir, are the strong armor, not my husband. Shame on you. My name is Lorraine Mohill. Thank you.
Just a few comments before I stand by my comments earlier that many small business owners came to me and said that they were pressured and felt threatened by Mr. Mohill's constant presence. Now, some people may call it selling, other people may call it pressuring. And before we pat Mr. Mohill on the back for being such a good salesman, it's too bad he couldn't sell his message to the voters of Glendale. And it's too bad he can't sell his message to the staff of the city of Glendale. And it's certainly obvious he cannot sell his message to the city council members of Glendale. I'm not sure how good of a salesman he is, because all he does is come up to here and complain that all he has left is to look forward to for his retirement is his Social Security. How many times have we heard that? His Social Security. So before poor Mrs. Mohill is pressured to get up here and toe the line of her husband, I want her to know that I stand by my comments. And I can bring in a line of businesses who felt pressured by Mr. Mohill, who did lie, who did impugn my integrity and the integrity of Ms. Friedman. But the bottom line is we're not here to relive the election, which was another black page in Mr. Mohill's history. His history and his reputation seems to be going further and further downhill every moment that he comes before the city council. I think he should just give it a rest and not appear before us like the frustrated elf from the grim fairy tale Rumpelstiltskin, where the poor woman has discovered what his name is. I certainly regret that. I regret saying that, but that's really what I feel. As far as the independent expenditures go, well, that's what they're called, independent expenditures. They're independent of the candidate knowing how much, where, how, and when those expenditures are being made. So he can try to make any connection he wants to between what was done and what the contracts are and what the pensions are. He's wrong. He's feeding the city lies. And I'm very proud of the residents of Glendale for rejecting Mr. Mohill. This is probably the third time. Bravo, Glendale.
Mr. Najarian, just so the public will know, as soon as you start to speak, Mr. and Mrs. Mohill left the council chambers and went home, I guess. Next speaker, Margaret Hammond.
Goes to sleep when I sit too long. My name is Margaret Hammond, longtime resident of Glendale. Good evening, City Council people, members of staff, and the audience. I want to give a number that's very important to the city. I don't care. I had a person who just spoke that made fun of me because I keep giving out the free bulky item phone number, which is 818-548-3916. And the reason I do it is because everywhere I go, I mean my friends, people on the street, over at Home Depot say, that's good, Margaret. Keep saying that because it does work. People listen, and then we call or tell people to call. And it's good. It's needed. The corner of La Boyce on Palmer and Cottage Grove and that whole area, there are couches sitting there right now. It seems to have become almost a dump. And there were a huge amount of junk in front of the lot that I have complained about being used for parking and whatever. I have to tell you that that has been taken care of. That lot has been cleaned, and it was a huge amount of bulky items that were out there. They were using it for a dump. It was terrible. You would have died if you had to live and look at that going by every day. And anyway, and Mr. Najarian's right, citizens come and speak up. Sure, we're old ladies, me and Carol Jean, but we have a right. We've been residents of the city. We've paid our taxes, and we've put in our time. We've volunteered, and we have a right to speak up and stand up for what we think. And I want to say that we're thinking of one of the things that we won in a group. I won, probably, was the auto dealers, who had made up their minds that they would, and the city was going to help them, be given the corners of Elk, Lomita, Windsor, where those streets were going to be closed down. Mr. Weaver must remember that. You were on the city council then. And I said, no way, no how. You're crazy. Americana wasn't even really decided on at that point. Can you imagine if those streets had all been closed off, what the traffic would be like? We'd go nuts now. And I mean, that property was worth millions of dollars. They weren't going to pay a nickel for it. They were being given it. Yes, indeed. You should look it up, I'll tell you. Because, boy, I fought it. And we had a lot of people, and it was citizens from that area that fought it. Little old ladies like me. Anyway, another deal is, of course, the sign ordinances. We fought against a lot of that, too. But that ordinance is being somewhat ignored for the financial benefit of, quote, business, unquote, businesses, particularly Americana. Disgusting that they're getting away with, considering what the original deal was with Caruso. I remember that was one of the things I went to court, that he dragged me into court for saying over that particular sign thing. And but I mean, who cares? We stand up for what we believe in, and I believe in the quality of life in Glendale, and the reason that I do is that I believe we have to speak up. We think it's wrong, we have a right to speak. And a lot of good things get done, like the pool, swimming pool, a lot of other good things, Edison, a lot of the things that go on in South Glendale. But I got to tell you, we still have a lot of trouble with that parking. There on Louise, I own those apartments between Maple and, well, never mind. But it's horrendous. You can never get parking. And there's only one parking space per unit. So therefore, if there's a couple living in one bedroom unit, they have to park on the street. Their guests forget it. It's horrendous, horrendous. And I know, because I go there all the time, work on the place and do the gardening. Now, my one thing that it came to my attention is the notice of the public meeting regarding the post office, that they want to change our post office to a smaller location. Now, I don't know how will that affect our service in Glendale. If they're going to move it from that main post office and they don't even know the location where they're going to move it, what will that do to our service, or what effect will it have? And also remember that that building is a historical landmark. The Glendale Historical Group worked very hard to get that designated, and what will happen to that building if they move out of it? That's going to be a problem. So I'm hoping that you'll think about that and keep in mind that it is a beautiful building. It is quite a unique, site, I think, anyway. I like it. But anyway, then I'm old-fashioned. Thank you very much for your attention.
Mr. Weaver?
Yes, Mr. Friedman.
I'm glad you brought up the post office. I'm very concerned about the post office. As far as I know, Congressman Adam Schiff sent a letter to the U.S. Post Office urging them to not close the central post office. And as far as I know, they were not responsive. If a congressman can't get their attention, I don't think that we, sitting on this dais, will get their attention. But there is a hearing, I think this Thursday, here in council chambers, and I urge people to come and show their support for the post office and for keeping it open. It's a very important amenity. The downtown is growing. We know that. Maybe the U.S. Postal Service doesn't realize that. But they may think that that post office doesn't need to be so large, but definitely we will need that for these new residents. Something that I think we might have some impact on, though, is the building. Now, the building is listed on, as far as I know, on the National Register of Historic Places. But I'm not sure, and I've asked and I haven't gotten clarity about whether the interior of that building is at all protected. And I would like to find out. And I know that our Historic Preservation Commission had looked at protecting interiors of buildings, I think a year ago, and it didn't pass. Now, I would love that to go back to them in a more limited scope, which is protecting the interior of buildings that are landmarkable if they're open to the public, if they're public buildings like the post office, like some of our commercial buildings. I believe that when they examined this issue, they looked at it in a much larger context of including private residences, which is a lot more problematic. But I think you could make a case for protecting important structures, interiors as well, when they are publicly accessible. So I would like that to come back to Historic Preservation Commission for examination in that more narrow context, but I would also like to find out about the post office. I know the exterior is protected. I believe it is. But I don't know about the interior, and I'd like to know. And if not, let's see if we can do something on a very fast emergency basis to get the publicly accessible part of that building, even though it may not be publicly accessible into the future. But I think we can all agree that it's the interior of that building is probably even more spectacular than the exterior of that building. So I would really like to see what we could do to get the interior of that building protected. I don't know if I need a second to bring that back or if it's just informational.
I can tell you that staff is actually working on that very item.
Okay, so can you bring that back to council since it might move quickly and we have no control over the post office and who they sell that building to? It could be sold to a private entity who might gut the interior. So if we can do anything from our end quickly to change our ordinance to allow us to protect the interior of important structures like the post office, I think we need to do it very quickly. Do I have any support for that up here? Mr. Sinani?
Support.
Next speaker,
Can I just one more thing to Ms. Hammond? Ms. Hammond, I just want to add my voice to all those people who tell you that you should come back and keep talking about bulky item pickup, because apparently people need to be told more than once, and you're providing a public service. Thank you.
I don't know if the people who are leaving those out are people who are watching Channel 6, but maybe they'll catch it by accident, flipping around.
Okay, is that it?
That's it. Thank you.
Good. Last speaker, Aram Kazazian. No cards.
Maybe that was the first one you read.
Are you Faith Hahn? Yeah, I called your name a long time ago.
Oh, because I had notified the hostess is downstairs that I'm going to drink water and come right back.
Okay, you'll be next.
Good evening. My name is Aram Kazazian. I have a few things to go over. As you recall, 4 years ago, I was over here. I notified this council and the previous city manager that there were some issues with Glendale Water and Power hedge fund. The hedge fund, as you know now, we have lost millions of dollars. We haven't made any money. Any money we have made is being paid for broker fees and over and over on that. That's one of the reasons we're getting a water rate increase, electric rate increase now, because we're losing a lot of money. The total cost, I pulled the documentation of all the costs of the smart meter system. The smart meter, should I hold on?
No, go on.
Your time.
I'm sorry.
Okay, the total cost of smart meter system pulled from the records of the city is $73,988,390. That's the total cost I was be able to obtain. And the smart meter system is not still finished yet. Those are monies that was pulled out of Glendale Water and Power. Okay, we'll go now. There is a electric rate increase. The electric rate increase is 8%, 7%, 5%, 2%, 2%, over 4-year period of time. It's 5 increases, but over 4 years. So 4 years you're going to get that, not 5 year, by the way. It's 5 increases over 4 years. So we do have a total of 29.6% increase as stated by Glendale Water and Power executives at the meeting. Then on top of that, you have the customer charge. Customer charge goes up to approximately now 40% on top of that. So that increases that. On top of that, you have utility taxes that are hit 7%. It hits over the increase, so you're going to get additional electric increase there. Now, on the meeting at the Glendale Police Station, the executives of Glendale Water and Power notified us the total increase over the 4-year period of time, 5 increases over a 4-year period of time, is approximately 38%. And I'm trying to get that 38% justified, but I'm having a problem. Maybe somebody can justify to me that 38% we were notified on that day. I pulled the record, but I can get up to 33%, but where is the rest of the increase coming to 38%? So that's a question I have. It's a questionable matter, because when somebody says that, and I think, Mr. Ochoa, you were there, that you came a little bit later on during the day, that night there, but I was there, and they notify us that the total is 38%, but I cannot justify it unless it's somewhere hidden and I can't find it. I appreciate if you can notify me that prior to the next meeting so I can get my correct information at this time. So please, I need explanation. Now, there is also a charge in here that we're going to be hit by fuel adjustment charge. I called and asked for the fuel adjustment charges. What are those going to be increased? How are those going to be increased? They don't have any records of that. They cannot provide me any information. I couldn't get information on that. So is that 38%? It's going to be part of fuel adjustment charges, or what's going to happen? Now, just remember that there are a number of homes and businesses that are almost in poverty level. They cannot afford this 33 to 38% electrical rate hike. Maybe some of you can. That's not my business. But I know of a lot of people sitting home. They cannot afford to pay more money. I know of a lot of people are suffering to pay their utilities today, and they're getting shut down. So what are we doing? What's going on? If we're more careful of the losses we had, we avoid those losses, just like Starbird said, we are careful. We're watching Steiger, so we will not lose those monies. And apparently he wasn't watching it. So that's a little issue over there, and apparently that didn't happen. Thank you very much. We appreciate some of your information. You can come back to me and tell me where did he come up with the 38%. So I'd like to know. I don't think you'll be able to get that information tonight, but I'd like to collect that information. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you'll just indulge me, I've heard Mr. Kazazian mention hundreds of millions of dollars in hedge fund losses for about a year now, and I still have no idea what he's talking about. And I don't expect you to address his whole statement, but just in terms of, did we lose hundreds of millions of dollars in hedge funds?
Let's not go into it too deep.
No, not too much detail.
The short answer is no.
Thank you. That's short.
Okay.
Would you care to go through any of those other items?
Oh, no. We're going to have so many hearings on the electrical
Maybe,
rates.
sir, if just for indulgement.
Okay, sure.
We've had internal audit take a look at allegations of hedge fund. We trade energy, but we have not lost millions of dollars, let alone hundreds of millions of dollars. Smart meter, we have spent $43 million to date. Half of that was a federal grant. The other $21 million was spent by GWP. The other amounts, I'm assuming Mr. Kazazian is referring to other capital improvements that have been done to the overall system, but not to the modernization program. The rate increase that's being proposed is indeed over 5 years, 8, 7, 5, 2, and 2 over that 5-year period. The utility user tax was approved by the voters. The customer charge is part of the overall rate, and so when the rate plan that we are showing you shows very clearly, and certainly did at the meetings Mr. Kazazian was at, to understand what part of the rate the customer charge is. 38% increase, I don't know where that comes from. The actual compounded increase for single-family residential, if you go for the 8.8 in the first year, because that's what it would be on single-family customers, 7.7, 5.5, 2.2, and 2.2, the compounded increase is about 29% over those 5 years, but understand that base rates weren't increased over the last 5 years. So 2.9% over a 10-year period, 2.9% a year over 10 years is hardly something to get too excited about. And that's basically what's being asked because the City Council would not increase rates during the Great Recession. Fuel adjustment charges get reset back to zero. Those are charges that are passed through to residents. They go up, they can come down. They did go up in 08, 09, I believe 07, 08, 08, 09. They came down to basically a net zero over the next 3 years, and there was no rate adjustment charge in fiscal year 13. So the net result of all of that is that even with the first year rate increase that's being proposed, single-family residents' average bill will still be about what it is or less than what it was in fiscal year 08-09, which is a remarkable statement to be sure. And in terms of the low-income subsidy, that's something that comes back to the council, and really you have the opportunity to set that at whatever level you see fit. It is at $10 per month right now for low-income customers. That may go up at your pleasure and discretion.
And we'll hear a lot of this at the Water and Power Commission hearing, and when it's an action item here, introduced, and then when it's voted on. So we'll hear it at least 3 more times. Okay, last speaker, Faith Han Taragna. Sorry.
Faith Han Tarigna here. I just, wanted to say that, the mayor and city council must also put a 4-year pay raise freeze from police recruit to the sergeant to the chief and with the money saved from those pay raise freeze to start purchasing all brand new Dodge Charger Police Interceptor cars for black and white marked patrol for Glendale Police Department, because they're no longer making the Ford Crown Victoria Police Interceptor. That make and model is discontinued. And then also, with the money saved, the mayor and city council must start hiring more young Armenian men and women as police cadet 1, 2, and 3, and police recruit to have them do the police work themselves. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, I have no more cards. What is next? New business?
New business?
Mr. Quintero.
I do hereby move that the council authorize the city attorney to enter into and execute an amendment to the professional services agreement with the law offices of Gibbs, Giddon, Locker, Turner, Sinnett, and Wilboat, Barbara Godoys, setting the contract cap at $50,000 to assist the city attorney in giving bid and construction law related advice and assistance on construction, renovation, and repair work relating to parks and other capital projects.
Second.
Roll call.
Council members Friedman.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Sinanian.
Yes.
Mayor Weaver.
Aye. Mr. Sinanian.
Yes, I do hereby move that the city attorney be and hereby is authorized to initiate legal proceedings in Superior Court. The name of the proceedings, the defendants, and the nature of the action shall be disclosed to any person upon inquiry once the action has commenced. The city attorney is further authorized to incur any and all expenses necessary in connection with said matter.
You have a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Council members Friedman.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Sinanian.
Yes.
Mayor Weaver.
Aye. Anything else?
Move we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. A second?
Second.
We're adjourned. 8:20.